Hey YouTube, WaiyaPaints here. Today I'm painting the Unstoppable Colossus for use in the Ultimate Encounter in Marvel Crisis Protocol. I was super excited to paint this as Colossus is one of my favorite X-Men. Unfortunately though, his foot had a little bit of a print error, but thankfully I think I can hide it with a bit of positioning. I started by priming the base with Style Res Gray, and I wanted to do something new, so I primed Colossus in Rust-Oleum metallic finish. Looking back, maybe this wasn't the best idea, as it took a lot to get the yellow to cover over this, and in the end, it didn't really save me much time as I hoped it would. So let's get started. I started with the most dominant color, which in this case would be yellow, and for this I used P3 Cygnus Yellow. Now, yellow is notorious for its poor coverage, and even though P3 has a great covering yellow, putting this on top of the metallic was challenging. This ended up needing at least 3 coats to even get it halfway there. The metallic finish made it really hard for the yellow to really bite down on the surface, and it ended up pooling in the details. If this happens to you, be sure you use your brush to sweep away that excess paint so it doesn't flood your details out. I ended up using a thin coat of white paint so that the yellow had something to bite into on those flat surfaces. To shade, I used my Army Painter Speed Paint Crusader Skin. Looking back, I think I should have thinned this down a bit more, but it worked out well enough. This isn't the usual use of speed paint, but I've grown to really like using speed paint and contrast paints as shades and liners because they go on so buttery. If you use this technique, be sure to give it plenty of time to dry, as they do so slower than what you may be used to. Now it's time to soften those shadows by dry brushing our yellow back on top. This is a slow process, as you'll need to wait a little bit between coats, or else you end up just scratching off the previous coat. In this specific case, since I'm going section by section, it gives each part plenty of drying time before I come back with the next coat. Next, I'm going to lay down some Vallejo Scarlet Red for his pants and shirt. Again, I was having some coverage issues, and again I think it was due to the metallic prime. Lesson learned. 2 coats and a couple of touch-up spots and our red was down. With the red, I wanted to give it a subtle highlight, so I mixed in 50-50 with Vallejo Bloody Red and Scarlet and a little bit of water. Using this mix, I hit all of the major muscles, making sure his thighs pop, because my boy Colossus never misses leg day. Next up was his boots, which got a coat of P3 Bootstrap Brown. Here we can see his deformed heel. If this was going to be a showpiece, I would have reprinted him. But his base has an angle where the boot won't really be noticeable, so I let it be. Once that brown was dry, I hit it with another speed paint for a shade, in this case hardened leather. I tried to focus this on the heavy folds and creases, but this still came out a little bit darker than I would like. So to finish them off, I dry brushed on a little bit more of the Bootstrap Brown to tone it down a bit. Next, a quick coat of Citadel Sycorax Bronze for his belt. I just love this color, and it goes on super smooth and shades well. In this case, it was Citadel Reichland Flesh. I wanted to tackle his helmet next. I pushed a bit of Nolan oil into his mouth and eye holes, because doing this later would be a bit more problematic. Next, I used Army Painter Speed Paint, once again, this time Bloody Red, as a filter over the metallic finish. This worked out so well in one clean coat. I also used it on his armbands and bracelets to make sure they tie the look together. Since a layer of speed paint this thick will take a while to dry, even with a hairdryer, I switched my focus to the base. Starting with Bootstrap Brown, I based the ground to go for a more construction site look. Also, using the same brown I used for the boots will help hide that missing heel when we assemble it. Following this with a bit of Vallejo Cold Gray on the main stone and cinder blocks. I didn't bother waiting for the brown to dry, and mixing a little bit of the brown with the gray was the goal. I feel it gives the rocks a dusty look and better blends them in with the base. Next was shading. The ground got a heavy wash of Reichland Flesh, while the rock got Nuln Oil. Again, I didn't bother waiting until they dry and let them mix where they meet. This was a good time for us to go back and look at our Tin Man and give him a bit of black lining on his seams. This took a bit of time, but it's worth that time investment to make sure it's done right. Without these iconic seam lines, Colossus ends up looking very flat. Now let's get back to that base with dry brushing. The rock got us slashing a Stonewall Gray to try to lighten it up a bit and give it a bit of pop. Best not to overthink organic forms like this and let the model's texture do the heavy lifting. The ground got a similar treatment with Vallejo Khaki. Last thing to paint were the little metal bits on the base, which got a coat of Vallejo Liquid Silver. Man, I love this paint. It goes on so smooth in one coat, but you have to remember, you can't thin this or clean your brush with water. You need alcohol. Because of this, you want to make sure you use a brush that you don't really care about anymore, because you might ruin it. That aside, this paint is a dream to work with. I love it so much I decided not to shade it. Some might say that it makes them stick out too much, but I like the look. And as so long as you're happy with the piece, that's all that matters. Finishing up this one took an hour and 49 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this guide, and if you did, please think about hitting that sub button and checking out some of my other content. With that said, peace and chicken grease, and I'll catch you guys next time.